The commercial abalone diving operation off California's Farallon Islands had been harvesting shellfish for 12 years when dive master Tony Ramirez first noticed the great white shark that had taken up residence around their work site. The operation's location, 30 miles west of San Francisco, placed it in some of the Pacific's most shark-infested waters, where experienced divers understood that encounters with apex predators were an occupational hazard rather than a remote possibility. Ramirez had been diving California's shark-populated waters for over 18 years, his expertise in underwater safety and predator avoidance making him invaluable to commercial operations that required humans to work in environments where great whites were constant threats. The 44-year-old dive master from Monterey understood shark behavior well enough to recognize when their presence around human operations shifted from curiosity to active hunting. The great white shark that began stalking the abalone divers was unlike any specimen Ramirez had encountered in his extensive career working California's predator-rich waters. The animal's estimated length of 22 feet made it one of the largest great whites ever documented near the Farallons, and its systematic investigation of human diving activities suggested territorial behavior that exceeded normal shark patterns. The Farallon Islands' reputation as the Red Triangle was well established among California's diving community. The area's massive seal populations attracted great whites from throughout the Pacific, creating one of the world's highest concentrations of these apex predators. But experienced divers like Ramirez knew how to work safely in shark territory by following established protocols and maintaining constant vigilance. Ramirez's first indication that this particular shark was displaying unusual behavior came when it began following diving operations for extended periods rather than investigating briefly and moving on. Great whites typically showed brief curiosity toward human divers before continuing their normal hunting patterns, but this animal seemed determined to monitor every aspect of underwater work activities. Commercial diver Jake Morrison was harvesting abalone from rocky reefs when the great white made its first aggressive move toward human operations. The 31-year-old professional from Santa Barbara had been diving shark waters throughout California for over 8 years, but had never encountered a predator that displayed such obvious hostile intent toward working divers. The shark's approach to Morrison was methodical and calculated. The animal used the reef's complex underwater topography for concealment, while positioning itself between the diver and the surface, demonstrating hunting intelligence that exceeded normal great white behavior patterns. Morrison's first awareness of immediate danger came when he noticed the unusual absence of fish and marine life in areas that typically supported abundant populations. His years of commercial diving had taught him to recognize when an underwater ecosystem's natural balance had been disrupted by the presence of a large predator. The great white's charge from the depths demonstrated speed and power that challenged everything Morrison understood about shark behavior. The animal's massive bulk moved through the water with explosive acceleration that gave the diver no time to react or escape to safety. Morrison's survival depended on his ability to reach the rocky reef's protective crevices before the shark could close the distance between them. The predator's pursuit demonstrated persistence and hunting intelligence that exceeded normal great white attack patterns. Ramirez's emergency response from the surface support boat required him to enter the water with a powerhead designed for shark defense, but the great white's size and aggression made it questionable whether such deterrence would be effective against a 22-foot predator that had already demonstrated its willingness to attack humans. The shark's assault on Morrison was swift and devastating. The animal's massive jaws, capable of exerting over 4,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, closed around the diver's legs, while its powerful body began the thrashing motion that great whites used to disorient and kill their prey. Morrison's diving experience included emergency protocols for shark encounters, but nothing had prepared him for fighting off a predator that was actively trying to kill him. The shark's strength and aquatic advantages made traditional defensive measures ineffective against an animal perfectly adapted to marine hunting. The diver's emergency air supply and buoyancy compensator were damaged during the shark's initial attack, creating a life-threatening situation that required immediate surface evacuation. Morrison's survival was complicated by severe blood loss and the psychological trauma of being hunted by one of the ocean's most efficient predators. Ramirez's intervention using the powerhead caused enough pain and disorientation to convince the shark to release Morrison temporarily, but the predator's continued presence around the dive site made rescue operations extremely dangerous. The great white seemed determined to complete its attack on any human who entered its claimed territory. The shark's systematic stalking of the diving operation continued for hours, during which it demonstrated problem-solving abilities that challenged traditional shark safety protocols. The animal learned to anticipate human movements and positioned itself to intercept divers who attempted to return to the surface. Morrison's evacuation to San Francisco's trauma center required emergency helicopter transport, but his survival was complicated by massive blood loss and injuries that would end his career as a commercial diver. The shark's territorial behavior had escalated beyond normal predator patterns, making underwater work impossible in areas it claimed as its exclusive domain. The investigation revealed that great white sharks throughout California's coastal waters were displaying increasingly aggressive behaviors toward commercial diving operations. The animals were learning to associate human underwater activities with territorial intrusion, and were developing hunting strategies specifically designed to eliminate divers from their feeding grounds. The abalone operation's closure was forced by insurance companies that refused to cover diving activities in areas where great whites had demonstrated willingness to hunt human workers. The shark's territorial aggression had eliminated a commercial operation that had employed over 20 divers and generated significant revenue for the local fishing industry. The remote gold mining camp in Alaska's Brooks Range had been extracting precious metals from the permafrost for 6 years, when camp supervisor Bill Harrison first noticed the grizzly bear that had taken up residence in the dense willow thickets surrounding their operation. The camp's location, 250 miles north of Fairbanks, placed it in one of North America's most isolated environments, where extreme weather and dangerous wildlife pose constant threats to the 30-person crew. Harrison had been supervising mining operations throughout Alaska for over 16 years, his expertise in Arctic logistics and wildlife management making him invaluable to companies operating in environments where a single mistake could prove fatal. The 48-year-old supervisor from Anchorage understood grizzly bear behavior well enough to recognize when their presence around industrial camps shifted from scavenging to territorial aggression. The grizzly bear that had claimed the area around the mining camp was unlike any specimen Harrison had encountered in his extensive northern experience. The animal's tracks measured over 13 inches across, suggesting a specimen that weighed close to 950 pounds and possessed the kind of size that made it capable of destroying equipment and killing humans with equal efficiency. But it was the bear's systematic investigation of human mining activities that concerned Harrison most. Grizzlies typically avoided industrial activity whenever possible, but this animal had been circling their camp for over 3 weeks. Its behavior suggested it was studying human patterns rather than simply seeking food scraps. The mining camp's isolation was absolute during the Arctic summer. Their nearest neighbors were Inupiat hunters over 180 miles away, and weather conditions made regular aircraft operations challenging even during the brief summer season. The camp's satellite communications could reach headquarters in Anchorage, but help was hours away even under ideal conditions. Heavy equipment operator Maria Santos was conducting routine maintenance on excavation machinery when the Grizzly made its first appearance during active work hours. The massive predator emerged from a stand of Arctic willows just 60 yards from where the crew was working, its massive bulk and aggressive posture immediately identifying it as a mature male in peak condition. The bear's size was immediately apparent to everyone at the work site. Santos estimated the animal's shoulder height at nearly 4 feet, with a massive skull and powerful neck muscles that exceeded those of smaller bears she had observed throughout her career in Alaskan mining operations. This was a specimen capable of flipping over heavy machinery and tearing through steel structures. Harrison's attempt to drive the bear away using air horns and rubber bullets proved ineffective against a predator that seemed to view human industrial activity as an unacceptable intrusion, requiring violent response. The animal's fearless investigation of their deterrent efforts suggested it had lost any natural wariness of humans and machinery. The bear's assault on the camp's fuel storage was methodical and devastating. The animal's powerful claws and teeth punctured steel containers and destroyed pumping equipment, demonstrating strength and intelligence that exceeded anything Harrison had witnessed in 16 years of Arctic operations. Equipment technician Robert Kim was calibrating hydraulic systems when the Grizzly launched its first direct attack on human targets. The 29-year-old mechanic from Seattle had extensive experience with dangerous wildlife, but had never encountered a bear that displayed such obvious hostile intent toward industrial workers. The bear's approach to Kim was deliberate and terrifying. The animal used the camp's complex layout of equipment and structures for concealment, while positioning itself for an attack on a human who was focused on technical work rather than predator awareness. Kim's first indication of immediate danger came when he noticed that the normal sounds of Arctic wildlife had been replaced by an unnatural silence that suggested the presence of a large predator. His years of working in bear country had taught him to recognize when the environment's natural balance had been disrupted by something dangerous. The bear's charge across 40 yards of open ground demonstrated speed and power that challenged everything Kim understood about grizzly behavior. The animal's obvious intent to attack, rather than simply defend territory, represented unprecedented aggression toward humans in an industrial setting. Kim's survival depended on his ability to reach the safety of a reinforced equipment shelter before the bear could close the distance between them. The predator's pursuit demonstrated intelligence and determination that exceeded normal grizzly hunting patterns. Santos's intervention, using a high-pressure hydraulic hose, saved Kim's life, but resulted in the bear redirecting its aggression toward her. The animal's willingness to attack multiple humans simultaneously demonstrated territorial behavior that wildlife experts had never documented in Arctic grizzly populations. The bear's systematic destruction of the mining camp continued for hours after driving off the human workers. The animal's intelligence was evident in its targeting of critical equipment and communication systems, suggesting it understood the importance of eliminating human capability to operate in its territory. Mine foreman Dave Thompson was conducting safety inspections when the Grizzly launched its most serious assault on human targets. The 35-year-old supervisor had extensive training in dealing with dangerous wildlife, but had never encountered a bear that actively hunted humans rather than avoiding contact. The bear's attack on Thompson was swift and systematic. The animal's massive claws and teeth were designed to kill large prey instantly, and its hunting technique demonstrated the efficiency that had made grizzlies one of North America's most successful predators. Thompson's survival training included military combat techniques, but nothing had prepared him for fighting off a 950-pound predator that possessed both intelligence and overwhelming physical advantages. The bear's strength and speed made traditional defensive measures ineffective against an animal perfectly adapted to Arctic survival. The supervisor's emergency radio call brought Harrison and additional crew members racing to his location, but the bear's superior knowledge of the local terrain allowed it to retreat into the dense willow thickets before help arrived. Thompson's survival was complicated by severe lacerations and internal injuries that required immediate helicopter evacuation. The investigation revealed that the Grizzly had been involved in multiple aggressive encounters with industrial operations throughout Alaska's interior. The animal's behavior suggested It had learned to view mining activities as territorial intrusions that required violent elimination. The mining camp's evacuation was ordered by corporate safety officials who refused to risk additional human lives in an area where a large predator had demonstrated willingness to hunt industrial workers. The bear's territorial behavior had eliminated a gold mining project worth millions of dollars in potential revenue. The luxury safari lodge in Tanzania's Serengeti had been operating for 15 years when lodge manager Dr. James Mwangi first noticed the leopard that had taken up residence in the dense acacia forest surrounding their facility. The lodge catered to wealthy international tourists seeking authentic African wildlife experiences. But the massive predator that began stalking human activities was about to demonstrate that humans were no longer safe, even in supposedly controlled environments. Mwangi had been working in Tanzania's wildlife tourism industry for over 18 years, his expertise in predator behavior and bush safety making him invaluable to operations that brought tourists into close contact with dangerous African wildlife. The 42-year-old manager from Arusha understood leopard behavior well enough to recognize when their presence around human facilities shifted from opportunistic scavenging to active hunting. The leopard that had claimed the territory around the safari lodge was unlike any specimen Mwangi had encountered in his extensive experience with East African predators. The animal's estimated weight of over 180 pounds made it one of the largest leopards ever documented in the Serengeti region, and its fearless investigation of human activities suggested it had lost any natural wariness of people. The lodge's location, in a private concession adjacent to Serengeti National Park, provided what should have been natural protection from large predators through controlled access and professional guide services. But this leopard had demonstrated its willingness to enter areas of high human activity and systematically hunt people who had invaded its territory. Mwangi's first indication that the leopard was displaying unusual aggression came when it began stalking lodge guests during their evening game drives, rather than avoiding human contact. Leopards typically fled when confronted with multiple humans and vehicles, but this animal seemed to be evaluating people as potential prey, rather than threats to be avoided. Professional photographer Elena Rodriguez was capturing images of the lodge's sunset ambience when the leopard made its first appearance during peak human activity hours. The 34-year-old freelancer from Madrid had extensive experience photographing African wildlife, but had never encountered a predator that displayed such obvious confidence around humans. The leopard's approach to Rodriguez was methodical and calculated. The animal used the lodge's landscaping and traditional African architecture for concealment, while positioning itself for an attack on a human who was completely focused on photography rather than potential threats. Rodriguez's first awareness of danger came when she noticed the unnatural silence that had fallen over the lodge's normally active bird and monkey populations. Her years of wildlife photography had taught her to recognize when an ecosystem's natural balance had been disrupted by the presence of a large predator. The leopard's charge across 25 meters of open ground demonstrated speed and power that challenged everything Rodriguez understood about big cat behavior. The animal's obvious intent to attack, rather than simply intimidate, represented unprecedented aggression toward tourists in a safari lodge setting. Rodriguez's survival depended on her ability to reach the safety of the lodge's main building before the leopard could close the distance between them. The predator's pursuit demonstrated persistence and hunting intelligence that exceeded normal leopard behavior patterns. Mwangi's intervention using pepper spray and emergency flares saved Rodriguez's life, but resulted in the leopard retreating only temporarily into the surrounding forest. The animal's willingness to return repeatedly to the lodge's perimeter suggested it viewed the facility as hunting territory rather than an area to be avoided. The leopard's systematic stalking of lodge guests and staff continued for over 10 days, during which it demonstrated intelligence and adaptability that challenged traditional safari safety protocols. The animal learned to avoid areas where humans were alert and concentrated its hunting efforts on individuals who were isolated or distracted. Lodge security guard Peter Kimani was conducting routine perimeter patrols when the Leopard launched its most serious assault on human targets. The 27-year-old Maasai guide had extensive traditional knowledge of dangerous wildlife, but had never encountered a leopard that actively hunted humans rather than avoiding contact. The leopard's attack on Kimani was swift and systematic. The animal's powerful jaws and claws were designed to kill prey much larger than humans, and its hunting technique demonstrated the efficiency that had made leopards one of Africa's most successful predators. Kimani's traditional warrior training included methods for dealing with leopard encounters, but nothing had prepared him for fighting off an 180-pound predator that was actively trying to kill him. The animal's strength and agility made traditional defensive measures ineffective against a cat that could climb trees and leap incredible distances. The security guard's emergency radio call brought Mwangi and additional staff racing to his location, but the leopard's superior knowledge of the local terrain allowed it to escape into the dense acacia forest before help arrived. Kimani's survival was complicated by severe lacerations and the psychological trauma of being hunted by one of Africa's most efficient predators. The investigation revealed that the leopard had been involved in multiple aggressive encounters with humans throughout the northern Serengeti region. The animal's behavior suggested it had learned to view safari lodges as sources of easy prey rather than areas to be avoided. The safari lodge's temporary closure was forced by Tanzanian tourism authorities, who refused to permit operations in areas where large predators had demonstrated willingness to hunt international guests. The leopard's territorial behavior had eliminated a tourism operation that employed over 40 local staff members and generated significant revenue for the regional economy. The offshore wind farm maintenance vessel, Storm Rider, had been servicing turbines in the North Sea for 3 years when marine engineer David Walsh first encountered the pod of orcas that would terrorize his crew and nearly destroy their operation. The specialized vessel was equipped for extended maintenance work on wind turbines located 40 miles from the Scottish coast, where crew members faced constant threats from extreme weather and aggressive marine life. Walsh had been working on North Sea energy installations for over 14 years, his expertise in underwater structural maintenance making him invaluable to renewable energy operations throughout the region. The 39-year-old engineer from Aberdeen understood marine mammal behavior well enough to recognize when their presence around industrial facilities shifted from curiosity to territorial aggression. The orca pod that had claimed the waters around the wind farm consisted of 16 animals, led by a massive bull that measured over 29 feet in length. The pod's size and coordination suggested they were apex predators operating at the peak of their hunting efficiency, but their systematic interference with human maintenance activities indicated territorial behavior that had never been documented in North Sea orca populations. Walsh's first indication that the orcas were displaying unusual aggression came when they began destroying underwater equipment, rather than simply investigating the wind farm's operations. Killer whales typically showed brief curiosity toward industrial installations before continuing their normal hunting patterns, but this pod seemed determined to eliminate human activities from their territory. The orca's systematic destruction of maintenance equipment was methodical and costly. The animals used their massive bulk and intelligence to locate and damage expensive monitoring devices while demonstrating their ability to eliminate human operations whenever they chose to do so. Maintenance supervisor Eric Johansson had been overseeing North Sea wind farm operations for over 12 years when the orcas began their assault on the Storm Rider's activities. The 47-year-old veteran from Norway had never encountered marine mammals that displayed such obvious hostile intent toward renewable energy operations. The pod's coordinated attacks on the vessel's underwater equipment were systematic and terrifying. The orcas used their massive heads and powerful tails to destroy monitoring systems and maintenance tools, while their intelligence allowed them to target the most critical components of the operation. Walsh's emergency dive to assess damage to a turbine's underwater foundation placed him in direct contact with the pod's alpha male, whose massive bulk emerged from the North Sea's dark water with obvious territorial intent. The whale's size and aggressive behavior immediately identified it as the primary threat to human operations in the area. The Orca's investigation of Walsh was methodical and horrifying. The animal's massive head, capable of crushing a human instantly, approached within feet of the diver, while its intelligent eyes studied the human who'd invaded its claimed territory. The whale's sudden charge toward Walsh came without warning, the massive predator's bulk moving through the water with shocking speed that gave the marine engineer no time to react. The animal's intent to ram the human diver was obvious, suggesting it viewed Walsh as a competitor that needed to be eliminated from its domain. Walsh's emergency ascent to avoid the Orca's assault was complicated by decompression requirements that made rapid surfacing potentially fatal. The nitrogen bubbles that formed in his bloodstream during the emergency ascent created a medical emergency that required immediate treatment in the vessel's decompression chamber. The Orca's pursuit of Walsh to the surface demonstrated a level of aggression that marine biologists had never documented in cetacean human encounters. The massive animal's head broke the water just meters from where the engineer struggled to reach the vessel's diving platform, its dark eyes fixed on prey that had escaped its initial attack. Johansson's emergency response brought additional crew members to assist with Walsh's rescue, but the Orca's continued presence around the wind farm made diving operations impossible. The pod's territorial behavior had escalated beyond normal marine mammal patterns, suggesting they viewed the renewable energy facility as an unacceptable intrusion into their domain. The Orca's systematic assault on the wind farm continued for over 14 hours, during which they destroyed equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and forced the suspension of critical maintenance operations. The animal's intelligence and coordination made them capable of eliminating human activities in ways that challenged traditional marine safety protocols. Walsh's survival was complicated by severe decompression sickness that required extended treatment and left him unable to continue diving operations. The Orca's territorial aggression had transformed a routine maintenance dive into a life-threatening encounter that demonstrated the growing boldness of marine predators. The investigation revealed that orca pods throughout the North Sea were displaying increasingly aggressive behaviors toward offshore renewable energy operations. The animals were learning to associate wind farms with territorial intrusion and were developing coordinated strategies for eliminating human activities from their claimed waters. The wind farm's maintenance operations were suspended indefinitely when the Orca's territorial behavior made underwater work impossible. The pod's aggression had escalated beyond normal marine mammal patterns, forcing the abandonment of critical maintenance that was essential for keeping the renewable energy facility operational. The remote archaeological expedition in Peru's Amazon rainforest had been excavating pre-Columbian sites for 8 months when site director, Dr. Carlos Martinez, first noticed the jaguar that had taken up residence in the dense jungle surrounding their camp. The expedition's location, deep within Manu National Park, placed them in one of South America's most pristine wilderness areas, where dangerous wildlife posed constant threats to the international team of researchers. Martinez had been leading archaeological expeditions throughout the Amazon basin for over 16 years, his expertise in pre-Columbian civilizations taking him to some of the region's most remote and dangerous locations. The 43-year-old professor from Lima understood jaguar behavior well enough to recognize when their presence around human camps shifted from curiosity to territorial aggression. The jaguar that had claimed the area around the archaeological site was unlike any specimen Martinez had encountered in his extensive experience with Amazonian wildlife. The animal's tracks measured over 6 inches across, suggesting a specimen that weighed close to 280 pounds. and possessed the kind of size that made it the undisputed apex predator of the rainforest ecosystem. But it was the jaguar's systematic investigation of human excavation activities that concerned Martinez most. These cats typically avoided human contact whenever possible, but this animal had been circling their camp for over 2 weeks. Its tracks formed an increasingly aggressive pattern around the dig sites, suggesting it was studying rather than simply exploring. The archaeological team's isolation was nearly complete during the rainy season. Their nearest neighbors were Machiguenga indigenous communities over 70 miles away through trackless jungle, and weather conditions made helicopter operations impossible for weeks at a time. The expedition's satellite communications could reach authorities in Cusco, but rescue was days away, even under ideal conditions. Graduate student Sarah Thompson was documenting ceramic fragments when the jaguar made its first appearance during daylight hours. The massive predator emerged from the dense undergrowth just 25 meters from where the team was working. Its golden coat marked with distinctive black rosettes that identified it as a fully mature male. The jaguar's size was immediately apparent to everyone at the dig site. Thompson estimated the animal's shoulder height at over 2.5 feet, with a massive skull and powerful jaw muscles that exceeded those of smaller cats she had observed in South American zoos. This was a specimen capable of crushing the skull of a tapir with a single bite. Martinez's attempt to drive the jaguar away, using noisemakers and flare guns, proved ineffective against a predator that seemed to view human presence as an unacceptable intrusion, requiring violent response. The animal's fearless investigation of their deterrent efforts suggested it had lost any natural wariness of humans. The jaguar's assault on the team's equipment storage was methodical and devastating. The animal's powerful claws and teeth made short work of reinforced containers designed to protect against smaller predators, demonstrating strength and intelligence that exceeded anything Martinez had witnessed in 16 years of jungle expeditions. Team photographer Michael Chen was documenting newly discovered stone carvings when the jaguar launched its first direct attack on human targets. The 32-year-old freelancer from Vancouver had extensive experience photographing wildlife, but had never encountered a predator that displayed such obvious hostile intent toward humans. The jaguar's approach to Chen was silent and calculated. The animal used the excavation's complex terrain and jungle vegetation for concealment, while positioning itself for an attack on a human who was completely focused on his work, rather than potential threats. Chen's first awareness of danger came when he noticed the unnatural silence that had fallen over the normally active jungle around their camp. His years of nature photography had taught him to recognize when an ecosystem's natural balance had been disrupted by the presence of a large predator. The jaguar's charge across 15 meters of open ground demonstrated speed and power that challenged everything Chen understood about big cat behavior. The animal's obvious intent to attack, rather than simply intimidate, represented unprecedented aggression toward humans in an archaeological setting. Chen's survival depended on his ability to reach the safety of the team's equipment shelter before the jaguar could close the distance between them. The predator's pursuit demonstrated persistence and hunting intelligence that exceeded normal jaguar behavior patterns. Thompson's intervention, using a machete and camp equipment, saved Chen's life, but resulted in the jaguar redirecting its aggression toward her. The animal's willingness to attack multiple humans simultaneously demonstrated territorial behavior that wildlife experts had never documented in Amazonian jaguar populations. The jaguar's systematic stalking of the archaeological team continued for over a week, during which it demonstrated problem-solving abilities that challenged traditional jungle safety protocols. The animal learned to avoid areas where humans were alert and concentrated its hunting efforts on individuals who were isolated or distracted. Local guide Antonio Vargas was leading a supply expedition back to the dig site when the jaguar launched its most serious assault on human targets. The 28-year-old Machiguenga guide had lived in the rainforest his entire life, but had never encountered a jaguar that actively hunted humans rather than avoiding contact. The jaguar's attack on Vargas was swift and systematic. The animal's powerful jaws were designed to crush the skulls of caimans and large mammals, and its hunting technique demonstrated the efficiency that had made jaguars one of the America's most successful predators. Vargas's traditional knowledge included ancestral methods for dealing with jaguar encounters, but nothing had prepared him for fighting off a 280-pound predator that was actively trying to kill him. The animal's strength and agility made traditional defensive measures ineffective against a cat perfectly adapted to jungle hunting. The guide's emergency whistle brought Martinez and Thompson racing to his location, but the jaguar's superior knowledge of the jungle terrain allowed it to escape into the dense forest before help arrived. Vargas's survival was complicated by severe lacerations and the psychological trauma of being hunted by one of the America's most efficient predators. The investigation revealed that the jaguar had been involved in multiple aggressive encounters with humans throughout the Manu region. The animal's behavior suggested it had learned to view archaeological expeditions as sources of easy prey rather than threats to be avoided. The dig site's evacuation was forced by university administrators who refused to risk additional human lives in an area where a large predator had demonstrated willingness to hunt researchers. The jaguar's territorial behavior had eliminated an archaeological project that was on the verge of major discoveries about pre-Columbian Amazonian civilizations. These encounters across the globe reveal a disturbing pattern of predatory aggression that is fundamentally altering the relationship between humans and the planet's most dangerous wildlife. From the great white sharks establishing territorial dominance in California's diving waters, to the jaguars eliminating archaeological operations in Peru's rainforests, apex predators are abandoning behavioral patterns that once made human activities possible in their domains. The animals involved in these attacks represent a new generation of predators that view humans not as threats to be avoided, but as competitors to be eliminated or resources to be exploited. Whether driven by climate change, habitat loss, or evolutionary adaptation, these creatures are crossing boundaries that wildlife experts once considered absolute and permanent. If these shocking accounts of predator encounters left you questioning your safety in marine environments and remote work locations, hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying stories of when nature's most efficient killers decide human activities are unacceptable intrusions into their territory. Each week, we document the most harrowing predator attacks from around the world, revealing how environmental changes are creating deadly new behaviors in animals we thought we understood. Because recognizing these evolving threats could mean the difference between a successful expedition and becoming the next victim of predators that have learned to eliminate human competition with devastating efficiency. The survivors of these encounters discovered that the natural world operates by ancient laws that recognize no human authority or right to exploit natural resources, leaving behind those who learned too late that we share this planet with creatures perfectly designed to reclaim their territory through violence.